Few emotions run as deep as love or hate. They are the polar opposites of each other in all aspects, yet they can both create another base human emotive state, anger. And when you talk of rage, fury, vengeance, and wrath, one man is head and shoulders above others with this force. Kratos is the embodiment of it. Tricked by Ares in killing those he loved the most, see the connection there? This drove him mad to become a one-man destructive force that makes Rambo look like a lollipop lady. Sorry, Stallone. Now, from his birth on the PS2 in 2005, he swore vengeance on the gods of Olympus and Greek mythology reigned from winged creatures, underworld battles, titans and gods, and of course, some truly magnificent battles that defied belief. PS2 was pushed hard by Santa Monica Studios as they created a game that delivered the mixture of an old-school sideways shooter, complete with boss battles that continuously outdid themselves, but framed within a 3D world and narrative more in line with a Clash of the Titans movie. It created a huge series and franchise for them, and Sony, with it selling over 4.6 million copies, and the studio became known for these titles ever since. Under the guise of Swearbox himself, David Twisted Metal Jaff, Kratos was his creation, a man filled with a relentless level of rage, a conduit for the player to go full beast mode throughout the titles. But the engine that powered it was SSM's own, the Kinetica engine, that came from the first game of the same name. Replacing bite suits with giant serpents and glory kills, it mixed platforming, puzzles, action and impressive QTE sections to great effect. The gore level in the game was another high point, in addition to sexual content confirming it was not for the kiddies. The games did receive some notoriety from watchdog groups and press at the time, fitting into the extreme hyper fantasy it focused on, almost like a Saturday morning pulp matinee gone mad. The combat was more in the realm of one of its inspirations in Devil May Cry, mixing fast action with heavy attacks, combinations and linkers to gain points from a successive series of blows. It was easy to pick up and a jaw-dropper to watch, with its also similar shifting camera views and fixed shots, which framed all the action as the developer intended for each section. The power of the engine was not as evident in the first game, being a racing title, and the first for the team and engine itself. Now granted with a far greater budget and full autonomy from Sony themselves, the team went wild with one bombastic set piece to another that was on the scale that even outclassed its Capcom news. 2 titles later, the PS2 limit had been reached, but not the story, with Cory Barlog directing the second entry in the intended Kratos trilogy and continuing the new director per entry form, which was also successfully ticked off when Ready at Dawn were given the reins to flesh that out with the first of the series prequels, Chains of Olympus, set before the first game. This came with their own request after they succeeded with the PSP release of Daxter, which also bore the origins of their own in-house engine, yes, the very same one that powered the Order 1886, Deformers and Lone Echo today, started life on the PSP. Telling the tale of such an active, angry god needed tweaks to that, along with them being instrumental in the later firmware patch that increased the PSP CPU frequency by 33%, which allowed the team to improve both AI, physics and effects in the game. It was a stunning looking title that carried over all the majesty of its PS2 release and was a technical showcase for the hardware, and a great seller to boot for the system, falling just over 1 million shy of the PS2 sales figures of the first game. Dynamic cameras, exaggerated action and flamboyant set pieces were delivered in portable form. This led to a greatly improved version launching in 2010 alongside the third installment on the PS3. Rad excelled themselves in Ghosts of Sparta, which is set between the first 2 PS2 games and pushed the PSP hard, even with more characters on screen, bigger battles and generally looked like it should have launched on the PS2. Something it later did on the PS3 with one of the vast collection of HD remasters that have been made. It was a fitting send-off for the third most successful handheld ever made. Rad converted the game to the PS3 and improved it. Both polygon count, texture quality and resolution were all increased along with performance to better utilise the PS3 hardware, but it was still a PSP game at heart. But this was a great springboard into AAA development as they greatly improved the engine, getting ready for the PS4's dawn. final entry in the intended trilogy was the most flamboyant yet and set tongues wagging with its impressive 2009 E3 debut, and it almost broke the trend of a new director per entry. Luckily, this was fixed when Cory Barlog left around 8 months into the project, leaving Stig Asmussen to take the helm and wrap this tale of revenge up. It took the base concept of the game but whacked the dial up as high as it would go, right from the start as you ascend Mount Olympus. Straight from the end of the second title, the visual impact the PS3 delivers is remarkable. This is nothing until you realise you are fighting on the back or arms of titans themselves that make you look like an ant. The scale of the game delivers was beyond anything else at the time and nearly since. The dynamic camera returns and again allows the team to capture each moment as intended from conception. The team, as is very common, used the PS3 port to bring the engine over from the PS2 but rewrote large chunks of code to better utilise the PS3's architecture. This included the rendering along with farming off the MLAA solution into the cell's SPUs. The increase in power also reduced the amount of pre-rendered cinematics in the game, with it also rendering all characters at the same LOD level no matter the distance from view. A wasteful but damn impressive feat nonetheless. Even more so, like previous titles, it ran an unlocked but V-synced frame rate this time, delivering both an eye-watering visual ensemble and a very smooth one. This was later improved with the PS4 remaster. I did warn you on this, and you can learn more about that with my God of War 3 analysis. The story was done and the god was avenged, or so we thought. Yet another prequel was made for the PS3, and even though it was not met with the same love and sales as the previous games, it was the most technically proficient game the team and engine handcrafted, and still stands as one of the most impressive games of not only the PS3, but the entire 7th generation of machines, more so as a definition of empowering the artist rather than simply increasing poly counts. The improvement to particle counts, dynamic lighting and texture asset range delivered the striking shift over the third game. Even by the team's own admission, this was a refinement of the engine and it worked. It continued the hand animation of previous games, only employing capture for the dialogue in the game's real-time cinematics, becoming the true origins of the character as it was set months after he killed his family, and as he rose to infamy. The story was very gritty and provocative at times, staying true to the core mechanics of the game with new weapons and abilities, and yes, it also had a new director. But with time passing on the series after its lukewarm commercial reception after its March 2013 release, it was left to ponder on what and if this series had a new beginning. After rumours of a new lead and change of mythology, one of those turned out to be true at least. Using the techniques and info from porting God of War 3 to the PS4, a double whammy used by many teams over the years, the team have again improved their engine to harness the new hardware afforded, and the results are as equally breathtaking as the last, if now far more intimate. Incorporating a freely controlled third-person camera rather than the fixed views of the older titles, it does look much more modern in that sense. In this new high-definition world, much is said of the lack of innovation and technical progression in games. It is not always possible to lay titles side by side with a direct comparison of steps that have been made. With a game such as God of War, though, always at the bleeding edge of what can be achieved on the particular console in question, we do have the ability here to test that. We have seen the shift from PS2 to PSP to PS3 already in this video, and that shift was as much about resolution as it was about textures. The polygon count increased, but the biggest gains came from the improved details that normal maps, refined texture quality and higher sampling allowed, but also animation, giving characters not only a wider set of moves but also more nuanced touches to them. The link between all of these comes from one main area: memory. A total of 36 megabytes on the PS2 became a mammoth 512 megabytes on the PS3, an increase of nearly 15 times that gave the artists, musicians, programmers, animators, sound designers a much bigger canvas to work with. Now this leap to PS4 delivers 16 times that amount for the system and has given us the same increase in visual quality as before. But where before we had a much lower base to improve upon that was used to improve the fidelity, the same is true again here. But like the changes we saw in Ascension, this is about refinement of those visuals and the texture quality. The huge increase again of over 2.5 times the resolution pretty much from the old 720p of Ascension to the native 1080p here on the PS4 is probably the smallest change you've seen, even though most people concentrate on that number more than anything else. It is the wrong thing to concentrate on, as I say all the time. You can see from the visual quality here and comparing, the actual polygon count, yes, of course, has increased, but this is also down to memory again. You can handle more verts in your buffer, therefore you can create more polygons per object. But on top of this, and specifically, it's about the memory and the techniques that are now available due to this increase in memory and power. Using that resource more effectively here, you can see that they've not only opened up the scope of the game, allowing it to be fully controlled and dynamic from the static or at least fixed and controlled camera views of the older titles, giving you full view of everything happening in the game. And on top of this, like I say, the animation has improved, now showing much more pain and misery from the enemies and creatures that you kill. There's a great example here as the troll winces in pain as it's pulled back and then smashed into the ground. You can see the deformation system not only on the body and the chest of the creature, but also the face as the cheeks wobble and flap in slow motion as it smashes and deforms into the flat surface. Now this looks to be a combination of blend shapes from the polygonal meshes themselves and also normal map blending to give the simulation here of skin folding and obviously physical movement in the skin and the muscle deformation that you see. This also adds the weight to the gameplay itself by adding that grimace, and the pain and anguish of the animals may also open up options in the title where you can show mercy or not, dependent on how you feel throughout the gameplay. And this will add additional benefits to the game because you can now physically see and therefore experience the pain and anguish of these creatures in the game. Whether or not Kratos shows any mercy, though, is yet to be seen. Probably not, though, knowing Kratos. The game also has other beautiful features. The lighting obviously has been vastly increased, now having far more dynamic light sources, point lights, area lights, and even a global illumination bounce, including penetration through the trees here. You can see the global illumination bounce on the edge of the boat as it bounces off the tessellated water here on the intro of the latest trailer. On top of this, it also uses adaptive tessellation in the game itself. Tessellation is used very similar to what we saw in Rise of the Tomb Raider. This may be used in other parts of the floors, ridges and rocks, but you can definitely see the adaptive tessellation used in the snow. It also demonstrates the particle system of the game, with snowflakes drifting in the air and embers from fires later drifting around, including magic spells. Everything is far better realised in this improved PS4 engine, which obviously looks to also include physical destruction and manipulation in the game, so hopefully this will also play into the gameplay from what we see in these early demos. Improvements continue in the title with a physically based rendering material system now evident. You can see the contrast in the shiny specular tone of his armour and the leather touch of his glove, in contrast to the wood and the fabric behind, which has a strong diffuse as it scatters across the surface. This looks beautiful in action, and the rest of the game delivers the same impeccable quality. But special mention must be given to the skin. Not only does it have the muscle and fat deformation on the back of Kratos' neck and other characters in the title, even the lines on his nose as he scowls, but also looks to be the best quality skin I've seen thus far in a game, mixing a subsurface scattering blend which you can see on his ear, in contrast to the roughness of the rest of his skin, giving a rough diffuse across nearly all of his surface materials and a very low specular tone. The bidirectional reflectance distribution function, or BRDF, is very well used here across all materials, but skin stands out in the quality we see, and you get to see a lot of Kratos' skin in these early demos, but other characters and enemies in the game also exhibit the same high quality materials across the board. The quality of their hair and the beards, I think, has just snagged that award back from Ready at Dawn with the best quality beards in a game thus far. And Kratos is always a trendsetter, with others in the game following suit with mini beards. The use of colour tones in the title is also impeccable, mixing a blander white or even paler blue section, strong blues mixed with volumetric lighting and even orange tones for warmer areas, adding that sense of feeling and emotion to certain scenes. The shot where Kratos is dragging in sun with the caustic reflections on his face is a highlight for me. And all of these areas that I've covered, and even more in this title that I have not, prove that this is a real leap over what we've seen on previous generations. Just looking at the Kratos figure, which was incredibly detailed on the original PS3 titles here with Ascension, you can see the leap from this to this looks specifically like we've gone from a game to a pre-rendered CGI movie. It is without doubt a huge leap over what we've had on previous generations. But they also haven't lost track of the fact this is a God of War game, so scale is important, and even though Kratos is now a much more looming figure in the title, yet he still looks small against the troll, and later he looks absolutely minuscule compared to the World Serpent. So I'm sure there's going to be even greater, more epic sections in this game, just as we saw in older titles, even if they're keeping it more intimate throughout the gameplay. The shift away from Greek mythology and into the Norse mythology really has me interested, as there is so much material here to dive into. I cannot wait to get my hands on and get some first play of this new title from God of War, which looks to be a refreshing change in all directions, but still true to the origins and a technical leap over everything we've seen before. And as always, if you like what I do and the work that I put together here on my website or on other videos, then please feel free to subscribe and support me by liking below, sharing where appropriate, and if you can afford to, you can also support me on my Patreon site, which the link is below and also on the website. You can follow me on Twitter, and be prepared for a storm coming. I'll catch you on the next one.
What is this?
It's the world serpent.
Take hold, boy!
I am!
What is it saying?